The Michael Hatfield Remax team presents Real Estate and More.
Bay Area real estate is different than in all of America. And why? What's up with home buyers? What's on sellers' minds? How is the market? And much, much more.
Now, here's your host, Michael Hatfield.
Real Estate and More show. Today, we continue with Blood Red, the Hatfields and McCoys, part 2 of a 3-part series. In part 2, we continue to unpack the events of this interesting part of American history. We have third-generation great-grandson of Hatfield family patriarch William Anderson Devilance Hatfield on the show to tell us more. After the Civil War, inhabitants of Appalachia were impoverished with hardships beyond belief. If a vendetta such as the Hatfield-McCoy Feud broke out, there was no forgiveness, and it lasted for decades. Getting deeper into details of the Blood Red feud, welcome back the curator of the Hatfield-McCoy Museum and Foundation in Sarah Ann, West Virginia, Mr. Jack Hatfield.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of marriages and business transactions and deals prior to the Civil War and prior to the feud, where both families got along very well for many years, probably over 100 years if I had to go back about when the first settlement came in. Hatfields are known on the West Virginia side, but there's actually 2 clans of Hatfields. You have the Hatfields that are on the West Virginia side, which are called the Creek Hatfields, as Devilance's clan, us. And then we have the others, which we call the River Hatfields, and those are the Hatfields that are on the Kentucky side of the river that are considered the peaceful clan.
I'll be unbelievable. So this feud began, and it was felt all over the nation at the time. It started and ignited. Let's just start with this Asa Harmon McCoy when he was killed by the Logan Wildcats. That was in 1865. And then after that, what happened then? We had an industrial boom of commercialism. Yep. We had the coal industry. We had the lumber industry trying to feed the people and to reduce the poverty in the region. The coal industry would be bust and boom, bust and boom. So people would have money for food one minute, then the next week not have anything. So the economic conditions were just terrible at the time, almost unbelievably bad and poor in a very impoverished part of the nation. So it could happen. It could happen anywhere, and that's why we have to protect our way of thinking and also work to take care of our livelihood to where we can eat. So Randall McCoy, let's talk about the pig in 1878. What is the hog story that we know about, and also that led to the legal issues that came?
Well, the hog was a dispute between Randall McCoy and Floyd Hatfield. Floyd was, I haven't done the math and I'm not good with genealogy, but Floyd was even from a whole other side of the Hatfields. He had been like Devilance's third cousin, twice removed or something like that. They were so far, apart in relation. But everybody seems to think it was Devilance that had the hog dispute. But it was actually Floyd Hatfield. Floyd had bought land from Devilance. And, again, you kind of go over the mountain, versus the way we drive around them and through them. So it's, it was a lot easier. But, that hog went from one side of the mountain to the other side. It ended up on, someone else's farm. And there was a dispute over that. And then, of course, that went to court about the same time as the land dispute went, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. But, that went to court. And then there was a McCoy who was married to the Hatfields. And we'll get into that, too, I think. But the hog dispute, it was kind of at the time, it was something very minimal and was not a huge impact as far as the feud was concerned. But it definitely started fueling more animosity between Randall McCoy and the Hatfield family. Or the Hatfield name, I guess we should say.
So then it went to court. But just moving back just for a second, it may or may not be true, but I understand that hog was donated to a barn dance, which was to help resolve some of the hostilities between the families. Or did you ever hear that particular legend? Didn't hear that one.
No, I haven't heard that one. Again, there's a lot of different theories out there and things like that. What I'm more familiar with is, what we have documented as far as like court trials and things like that. The jury was made up of 6 Hatfields and 6 McCoys.
Yeah.
And then the judge, of course, was a Hatfield. So in that case, that became, the Hatfields won that court case, because one of the McCoys, who was married to a Hatfield, testified that the hog belonged to the Hatfields.
Yes. And then what happened?
With that particular
Bill Staton. Yeah, he was the witness that stepped up and said that he saw the Hatfield Floyd, Mark the pig,
right?
And then they won the case. Then what happened?
Well, they say happy wife, happy life, right? So he was married to a Hatfield, but he was of McCoy descent. So, and what kind of, and this gives you a glimpse of what's to come, I guess. But the McCoys ended up hunting him down and killing him for testifying in that hog trial that it belonged to the Hatfields. Which is very sad. I mean, that's their own blood, their own family, Yeah. That's not even them coming after a Hatfield. That's them coming after their own. And unfortunately, Roseana, later on we'll talk about, but Roseana kind of, ended up with the same fate. But there was kind of telltale signs early on, especially at this hog trial, that kind of facilitated what was to come.
Unbelievable. It just, no one is condoning these actions that were taken. No. It's just part of history, and we're recounting the history.
Yep.
But it's tough to recount the history without understanding the hardships that this particular area and these particular families went through. So anyway, the witness was taken out by a member of his own family, which was, kind of tough, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then along came the forbidden romance and the several court disputes that happened and came into the mix of all of this animosity going on and rivalry. And, again, there was a division between people that would work as commercialists, in the coal industry, in the lumber industry, as opposed to people that only knew how to farm. And during this period of time, you wanted to avoid election days, it looks like, because on one of these election days back in 1880, Roseana McCoy, which was Randall McCoy's daughter, the patriarch's daughter, she took a liking to John C. Hatfield. Let us know some more about that, would you, Jack?
Well, before we get that far, I want to back up one moment to the land dispute. The land dispute was between Devil Anse and Perry Klein, one of Randall McCoy's cousins. So you had cousins, with the hog trial and cousins with the land dispute. The land dispute was with Devil Anse, and that settled and went to court 3 months after the hog dispute did. And that land dispute was over 5,000 acres of land. So a lot of money you're talking about there. And Devil Anse won that court case against Perry Klein. So that just threw gasoline on the fire right there. And then you're right. Then the next situation that came up was Loverboy Johnsey fell in love with Roseana McCoy, which was Randall McCoy's favorite daughter and child. He met her at the Election Day event, you're right, in Pike County. That was so what was interesting was that the Election Day events also took place as the hog trial happened. So that, things were centered around that location right there. So a lot of events happened at that site. You had the hog trial, the love story, and then some more things that we'll talk about coming. But she ended up coming to live with the Hatfields. Jauncey wanted to marry her. De Valence refused to allow them to marry because he knew, it would embarrass Randall McCoy. So he was trying to cool the tensions down and would not allow them to marry. Roseana ended up trying to go back home to the McCoys, and unfortunately, they disowned her, and she ended up moving in with her Aunt Betty, and ended up having their child together at Aunt Betty's house. Unfortunately, that child died very young, and she died not too long after. And they always say she died of a broken heart, and she has a really sad story as part of this feud. They call it the Appalachia Romeo and Juliet, right? Story. So, but again, the McCoys turned their back on her as well during this. So it was pretty bad, and they had a lot of outstanding warrants on Jauncey in Kentucky, which for bootlegging and moonshining, as we talked about earlier. But again, you had a state line that you didn't cross. Remember the Civil War,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So tensions were still high against state and state, and West Virginia being new territory. So it was kind of a muddy situation on the warrants and things like that between Kentucky and West Virginia, because you've got Kentucky issuing warrants for West Virginia residents, which at the time was illegal at the time.
That changed a little bit later on, though, I think. In August of 1882, another election day festivity, ceremony, and so forth, the beloved brother of De Valence, he's mortally wounded. That's Ellison Hatfield. He was mortally wounded in a brawl with three of the McCoy's sons during those election day festivities. What have you got to add to that?
Yeah, that is actually where, in my opinion, that was a pivotal point for the feud. Definitely. So, you had just 2 years prior, you had Jauncey and Roseana run off together, get married, or attempt to get married, had a baby, all this going on. And that was also right after the Hog trial, and them killing Bill Staten, their own blood, within 2 years of this situation here that we're about to talk about. But at that same Hog trial cabin is what we call it today. That's where the election day event was also held. And at that event, three of Randall McCoy's sons, Tolbert, Farmer, and Randolph McCoy Jr., they attacked De Valence's brother, Ellison Hatfield, 3-1. They were young boys. Ellison, of course, was middle-aged, getting up there, man. They stabbed him 27 times, I think it was, and shot him once. It took him a few days to bleed out. And it was, a pretty awful situation. And it was in broad daylight with hundreds of people watching, that were there for the election day event celebration. So, it was done in broad daylight. There's, a ton of witnesses. And, so there was no doubt of their guilt during the situation.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Remax.
And here's Michael Hatfield.
Business owners, have you considered how important the appearance and impression your offices make to prospective customers? Appearance and impression are critical to clients, thus to your overall success. If your company could use that warm, inviting, and welcoming appearance, I have an amazing complex of offices just listed for lease in the quaint town of Danville. Freshly remodeled, meticulously built, the 3,700 square foot space enjoys incredible street exposure, front and side entrances, abundant parking, reception, conference room, 11 individual offices, even a team member kitchen. This premium space is located in a blue ribbon building maintained by the renowned Sherman Properties Group. Waste not 1 minute. Call us now.
Get help with buying or selling by calling the Michael Hatfield RE/MAX Support Team at 1-800-800-5763. That's 1-800-800-5763.
And now, back to our show.
But again, this took place technically in Kentucky.
Incredible. Incredible. And then there was a quick thinking judge, I think, said that, hey, we're going to get these boys and we're going to get them incarcerated and protect them so that before the Hatfield family can, go after them. Well, they didn't do it fast enough. And then we get into the famous August 9th of 1882, the Pawpaw Bush. And it's an egregious event that happened. The Hatfields went and collected the 3 boys that murdered Ellison, and they tied them to the pawpaw bushes. And I don't know what a pawpaw bush is. I don't think I've ever seen one, but it's indigenous back there. And then they murdered him.
They executed them for the murder of Dev Lance's brother. See, you're talking about, the Logan Wildcats, the West Virginia legal system, and the Kentucky legal system. Again, state division, right? New state. So this became a legal nightmare. When they captured those boys, the Kentucky law enforcement was in the process of taking them in. And you're right, Dev Lance's brother Wall decided, who was the judge, decided, they would not really face those charges in Kentucky like they should, that they should face for killing him. So they decided to take the law into the West Virginia side of the authority instead of the Kentucky side. But the killing, the murder of Ellison, Dev Lance's brother, technically happened in Kentucky. So they rounded these boys up and, and brought them back here because they were going to make sure they faced their charges for his murder. So you're right. What they did is they tied them up to what we call pawpaw trees or bushes. It's really more of a tree than a bush, when they get older. But they tie them to these pawpaw trees. It's a pawpaw it's a fruit tree, so it's a fruit that it emits out in like a local fruit. And what was important here, this situation is they tied them up on the Kentucky side of the river. So Dev Lance promised that they would face their judgment, execution, punishment, what have you, in Kentucky. So he tied them up to those pawpaw trees on the Kentucky side of the Tug River. But then they stood on the West Virginia side of the Tug River, where they had legal authority, and shot across the river. A firing squad shot across the river, taking out the 3 McCoy boys in Kentucky. So now you had a legal nightmare. Did the event happen in Kentucky? Did it happen in West Virginia? Where, was it a legal execution? Was it not? It wasn't, they had no trial. So although there was tons of witnesses and everything, they would clearly have been found guilty, or should have been found guilty in Kentucky if they had had a trial, but they didn't have a trial. They went straight to the execution.
So there were indictments at that time, were there not, against the Hatfield boys that did this? And then the indictments went unfulfilled for many, many years, correct?
Yeah, wow. Because again, it's murky water there. You're literally, you have 2 states that are not friendly states with each other. It happened on a state border. Who's responsible and where would they face their charges? Did it happen in Kentucky? Did it happen in West Virginia? Would it go by West Virginia laws? Which is a new state being set up? Would it go by Kentucky laws? So it became a legal nightmare, the situation did. And this is also when governors started getting involved with political ploys. So then the feud kind of became a political battle between the Kentucky governor and the West Virginia governor.
So the Hatfield feud actually became a struggle between the two states, between Kentucky and West Virginia. They both had militias.
Yep.
And then you had the Hatfield boys that had been indicted but had not been brought to trial. Boy, and I understand, and I may be wrong, or I may be right, that they states almost went to battle against each other over this.
No, you're on point there. So the Kentucky governor eventually, down the line of the feud, he got upset that the West Virginia governor wasn't doing anything about it. And the Kentucky governor wanted to invade West Virginia, take the Hatfields, and said, while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and take more land for Kentucky.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Real Estate Minute with RE/MAX expert Michael Hatfield. Michael, what traits should we look for in selecting an agent?
Look for a deal maker with a positive attitude who will work tirelessly for you. An agent who is adept in multiple offer situations, drafting contracts, marketing and advertising a client's home, is familiar with multiple cultures, experienced in mortgage financing, inspections, and escrow, is a huge asset to his client.
What can you do as a plus for clients?
Your agent is your eyes and your ears, one who works behind the scenes on your behalf. A great attitude, working well with others, and keeping clients' priorities number one is a given for us.
Call 925-322-7775 now to schedule an appointment or complimentary home analysis. For excellence in real estate, call the Michael Hatfield RE/MAX team at 925-322-7775 or go to michaelhatfieldhomes.com.
Well, we were in the market to buy a house in Pleasanton for a very long time. So we saw this beautiful house. We walk in, we see Michael and Nancy. We just absolutely loved this house. Michael brought in a wealth of knowledge and experience to the whole home buying process. He was very professional, and both Michael and Nancy went way above and beyond to help us and to help us achieve the house of our dreams.
Now, back to our show.
And moved the state line. So that's why these bounties were put on the heads of the Hatfields as well. And over the governor trying to invade and take West Virginia, there's some theories out there that is not. I don't know if there's any evidence out there of this or not. Again, not a historian. They supposedly the West Virginia governor sent. Led by Devil Anse to protect the West Virginia border from Kentucky invading. But Governor Buckner at the time was the governor of Kentucky, and he was aggressive in trying to invade and take West Virginia, and he used the feud as political leverage to invade.
Ah, geez. And then they hired all of these people to go after the Hatfield family, which I think was one of the bad. Frank Phillips was one of the leaders of that. And during this period of time, there were deaths. I think Jeff McCoy, who was a nephew of Randall McCoy, he was shot by Cap, one of sons of Devil Anse, right? During this time.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting here too is that guy Jeff was Asa Harmon McCoy. You remember the first McCoy shot?
Yeah.
This is his son.
Oh.
Yeah. So Cap, Devil Anse's son, ended up taking out Asa Harmon McCoy's son as well during this.
Just unbelievable. So at this point, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, and then, with Frank, how he got so entangled was Johnsy, when Johnsy would not when Devilance would not allow Johnsy to marry Roseanna, and they broke up. Roseanna, got tired of, being an unmarried mother and, with her reputation, went back to the McCoys. The McCoys turned her away. She went to her Aunt Betty's house. She ended up, the baby ended up passing. Johnsy never got to see her again, or the baby or the child. I don't know if Johnsy ever even met the child. I'm not sure. But, Johnsy then, the second time, learned his lesson. He did not ask for permission the second go around. And he ended up marrying Nancy McCoy, Roseanna's cousin, Jeff's sister, Asa McCoy's daughter.
Wow.
So now you had Devilance's other son marrying Asa Harmon McCoy's daughter, the one that they killed in the beginning from the Civil War. So
then Cap killed the brother to Ace, or the son of Asa Harmon McCoy.
Yes. So when Cap killed her brother, that made her kind of turn away from the Hatfields. She also had an interaction with Uncle Jim Vance, where I think, he beat her, abused her while Johnsy wasn't home or something. So between that situation and then Cap killing her brother, Nancy decided to leave Johnsy and went back to Kentucky, where she ended up becoming entangled with Bad Frank Phelps.
Oh my! Just one thing right after another. So
yep.
Yeah, and this time the Hatfield and McCoy members were both being really kind of hounded and chased by deputy sheriffs, bounty hunters, and others. And it made some real hardship on everyone, and the animosities were so deep and so felt as part of history at that time. Then came the biggest event, in my view, of all time. The New Year's 1888 massacre and attack. What happened there?
Impoverished, hardships, deep animosities from a bloody civil war that took place literally in the backyards and around the homes of these Appalachian families. A family feud that almost pitted states against states. Next week, I hope you tune in for the final part 3 of the 3-part series, Blood Red, the Hatfield-McCoy Feud. They called him Devil Ants, a man they said was 6 foot of devil and 180 pounds of pure hell. We'll be back next week with the final part 3 of Blood Red, the Hatfield and McCoy Feud. I hope you tune in and have a blessed week. Please remember to go to our new YouTube handle, My Real Talk Show. That's My Real Talk Show at youtube.com, and touch that subscribe button. You can also find past aired shows at our handle, My Real Talk Show, on youtube.com.